And you know what? The Obama administration, through the U.S. Trade Representative, actually has stated its intent to simply, if this treaty gets finalized, implement it as an executive order without Congress ever getting to decide at all. And
the only hope then would be the judicial branch, right? Can the judicial branch strike down an executive order?
The judicial branch can declare an executive action to be unconstitutional, but it has to be brought as a lawsuit. They can't just say...
Well, you know the ACLU would be all over that if ACTA actually passed.
Hopefully, and there are a lot of organizations,
if nothing
mostly
else,
small
the
ones,
EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, would pursue a lawsuit if no one else would.
Hopefully, but keep in mind, the Obama administration has shown that it has no qualms about trampling on the Constitution. The Constitution says that any international treaty has to have Senate approval.
Right.
And it's actually a wonderful requirement because the Kyoto Protocol in 1997 had the full support of the Clinton administration. Mm-hmm. The Clinton administration negotiated it, participated very extensively in drafting it, but when it went back to the Senate, it failed unanimously because the senators recognized how devastating it would be to the U.S. economy. I think with ACTA, there would be similar concerns. Of course...
Oh, ACTA would be worse for the economy than any amount of carbon restrictions. Mm-hmm. The internet is the lifeblood of any developed economy, and especially an idea-based economy like the United States.
Yes. I would say the internet is the best and perhaps the only hope of Western civilization for overcoming the death grip that these vampire institutions, bailed out companies have on our country.
It's very interesting how there's kind of a new guard and an old guard in terms of information. This read-write and read-only difference in attitude. All the old guard is very top-down, read-only. There's one distributor who's in charge of everything, and you don't really get a choice. Whereas with this read-write, it's interactive. Everyone views it, everyone becomes a part of it. I've heard some people accuse this new model, like with open source software or Wikipedia, of being almost a kind of intellectual communism, which I find extremely strange because there's nothing more individualistic than every individual deciding that he or she wants to do something and being able to pursue that thing.
Yes.
Whereas that's not possible under the old model. TV is probably the best example. TV versus the internet. Where you have, in the old model, the venerable old newscaster sitting and talking to you, telling you exactly what happened, and giving you your one version of events that you're going to believe. And the new model on the internet is you go seek out information, and you find thousands of sources who all provide you with little bits of data here and there. And with that data, you can cross-reference and cobble together your own picture.
Yes.
It's probably going to be much clearer since it comes from 30 different perspectives instead of one.
And it requires an active and engaged mind as opposed to
a passive
absorbent mind.
Yes. There's nothing wrong with being absorbent and receptive from time to time. But there are times when one should think critically, and it seems to me like the new model engages one into doing that kind of thinking a lot more often.
It's interesting. A listener recommended to us a debate that we watched between Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, and Andrew Keen, who is a large critic of the internet and the freedoms and opportunities that it offers. Yes, well, Andrew Keen seems to have this kind of restrictive model of content creation.
This idea that you have professionals.
Experts, yes.
Experts.
And
that's the word he used.
He believes that in the 20th century there used to be a meritocracy where people got to be these experts on the basis of their knowledge and competency, and the better knowledge and the better informed individuals generally prevailed. I completely disagree with that characterization of the 20th century.
Sure. I think in the 20th century what was much more likely to happen was that you had some kind of connection to someone who knew someone in the TV business or someone who knew someone in X or Y business. And there were a few lucky individuals who managed to get in.
Yes.
But now you have way more people doing X, Y, and Z, and they can get there through the internet, which requires a very low barrier to entry. Mm-hmm. Just an internet connection, which you can get even in a public library if it comes to that.
And keep in mind, the 20th century, the era of mass media, was dominated by trash that was directed at the masses, essentially. The big media companies figured out that if they want to have a sufficiently large audience, they can't tailor it to the individual virtues and sophistications of particular viewers. They have to create a kind of generic spam type of product. A kind of product that appeals to everybody a little bit enough to keep them watching, and appeals to the lowest common denominator.
To be clear, those kinds of products absolutely still exist in internet culture. Again, you do have people like, well, Justin Bieber, to mention him again, who is this kind of cotton candy fluff or Twilight, something that is supposed to appeal to a broad range of a demographic strip, the kind of lowbrow, lowest common denominator thing that you're thinking of. But in addition to that, you now have a huge number of smaller bands. It's the rise of what might be referred to as the indie movement. Hipsters, saying my band is more obscure than yours, so my band is better than yours. Which is in itself a kind of individualism, if you think about it. It's a dumb kind of individualism. Mm-hmm. But you can see how it's the idolization of the small. With something like Britney Spears, it's she's good because everybody likes her, you see?
Yes, which is a ridiculous criterion.
But with
for
hipsters, it's this band is good because nobody knows about them and nobody likes them. Ha. Which is very interesting and a fascinating rebellion from standard pop culture.
Well, what I like is that there has emerged a niche culture of high intellectualism.
Oh, sure. Anything you're after now, you can find an intellectual or a musician or someone that specializes in just what you're looking for. And if you can't find it, you can make it yourself.
Yes.
Or you can band together with someone who would be willing to make it.
Yes. It seems that a true meritocracy requires as much open access as possible, so that people can, through their own efforts and their own talents, without having to pass through gatekeepers, accomplish something and access their end audience.
Now, one should be careful saying that, because it does approach things like affirmative action in a certain way.
Well, no. Nobody has to give entitlements to these things. I'm just talking about technological possibilities. And actually, with the internet, it's so easy for people to access a content distribution source. They can go onto any of a number of websites that offer free publication services, or they can pay relatively small fees and register their own domain names and publish. They can create videos for YouTube.
I was thinking more about internet access generally.
Oh, I think internet access is so ubiquitous these days that there shouldn't be a question about allowing people special privileges, entitlements, grants to access the internet. It's so routine, it's like what a telephone service used to be.
Well, I'm not sure. I think that there are still lots of places in the world where that's not at all the case. You're lucky to live in a place where internet access is almost completely ubiquitous. But if we'd lived somewhere like Vietnam, or one of the other developing Southeast Asian countries, a lot of Southeast Asian countries like Singapore and South Korea are already very close to universal internet. But there are still lots of developing places that are not anywhere close to that yet. Well, and I'm wondering about, I remember Mises once said that the government should subsidize opera. I wonder if Mises had lived in the age of the internet, if he would have said that the government should subsidize internet.
I don't think so, and the reason why is, look at what's been happening with cell phones in the underdeveloped countries. In Africa, cell phone usage per capita has been skyrocketing, and of course these cell phones, they rely on satellite signals. These satellites have been put up in orbit. They can potentially service the entire world. Likewise in Southeast Asia, cell phones have become very common in rural areas. So you have the very interesting scenario of farmers working with technologies that are thousands of years old, but now before
they have a cell phone in their pocket.
Yes, and now before they go to town to take their produce to market, they figure out, well, where is the best place to sell? Where are they offering the best prices?
Do you think they tweet, coming to sell bok choy in the market square? I'll be at the southwest corner.
But I think it's very important to realize that with these kinds of technologies, they advance so quickly that only private enterprise can provide them efficiently and provide them in the manner that people actually demand. Because with these kinds of large government investments in technology, they get frozen in time. They become stagnated. It's like the huge investment that occurred in the space program in the 1950s and 60s. It was state of the art for about 10 years.
I see where you're going with this, but my concern is actually something very different. If the government were to subsidize internet, it would have control over the internet. And I don't like that idea the least little bit. If any of you haven't yet seen the wonderful parody on YouTube called Cleanternet, I suggest you search for Cleanternet for a cleaner internet and watch it. It is an amazing parody of the proposed Australian internet filter. And if you watch it without knowing that it's a parody, you could initially believe that it's actually a commercial promoting this. It's really well done, and I think a very effective argument against these kinds of internet filters. But as soon as you let the government subsidize something, you tell it has power over that thing.
Yes.